Here.
Ms. Lowther,
Here.
Mr. Bannon,
Here.
Mr. Tamero.
Here.
Ms. Garrett,
Here.
Ms. Riley, Susan Riley,
Oh, me?
Sue Palmer.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Ms. Palmer,
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Mr. Grieco,
Here.
Mr. Etu, Mr. Etu,
Mr. Etu is not joining us.
He's not
Miss
joining us.
Trustee Murphy is filling in his
Yeah.
place.
I'm here instead.
Murphy,
I'm here.
okay, and Mr. DePriest is
I'm
in
here.
Zoom.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All set. Hello?
Kate, your voice is gone.
Sorry. Would anyone like to make any amendments to the village or to the minutes? I would.
Oh,
Can we go to page 2, Deb? It's under Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Kaufman. Can we change HOC to HPC?
HOC to HPC. Okay,
Correct.
it's a typo.
That was it. So I appreciate all the effort that went into creating these minutes. Thank you very, very much as always, Deb.
You're welcome.
I move they be accepted as amended.
And do I have
Second.
a second? Who was the second?
Mary?
Mary.
Mary? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. That is done. Now we'll move on to our new business for this evening. It was a self-nomination for local landmark status by the owners of 75 Evans Street. Do we have Mr. or Mrs. Hunt on the phone?
Yeah, actually, I'm on the Zoom meeting. Hello,
On
everybody.
the Zoom. Awesome.
Mhm.
I'm just going to scroll over so I can see you here. Hi. Would you like to introduce yourself and explain what you would like from the board this evening?
Yes, Christine Hunt, 75 Evans Street. And first of all, I'd like to thank you all for your time for this meeting and your time in reviewing our application. I'm very excited about it. It's something that we've considered for a long time, considered doing for a long time. And one of the, I guess, fortunate things that came out of the stay-at-home order was I had the time to pull a lot of documentation together and take pictures and order pictures and put everything together so that I could apply for both the local and state historic recognition for the home. And I'm sure those of you that have had it and have been able to look through it have already understand the history of it. And the reason we're doing it is we're very proud to be owners of this home. And we really want to preserve the history for future generations, for the posterity of future generations. And I really appreciate your committee's commitment to doing the same. I will start by saying that brief history, 1949, my great aunt and uncle purchased this home. And so it has been in our family for a very long time. In 1995, my husband and I purchased it. My aunt was meticulous on keeping documentation and she absolutely loved the village. And she was also very proud to have this home. So a lot of the documentation in there, documentation that she kept and collected and then passed on to me. The only reason she didn't do this, she told me one time, the only reason I haven't done this is because I don't want somebody to tell me what color wallpaper I can use. So, and I don't think she fully understood that she would not have to follow anybody else's guidelines except for structurally. So I don't think there's another village residence that has this much historic documentation with it. My great uncle who lived here is a noted and listed artist, so I'm sure someday he'll be in the history of it as well. So again, another thing that we're very proud of. I started compiling everything, like I said, a couple of months ago. In reference to the research paper, I did hear somebody say that was very helpful. That was actually done over 20 years ago. A friend of ours, when we moved here in '95, our next door neighbor's daughter was in college, and she knew that we were moving here. They came over and saw the house, and she approached me and asked if she could do a research paper on it at that time, which I applauded and said absolutely, because it'd be a great resource to have for the house. She did a wonderful job. She really, truly did. There's reference to the Underground Railroad. For those of you that received the packet, in the last page, actually, there's a little picture of a cubby in the basement. And both she and another anthropology professor from UB thought that may have been a false wall room because there's a circular hole in there as a drop down, and they do believe that slaves could have hidden there. This was supposed to be part of the Underground Railroad because Harry Bigelow was a known abolitionist. Like I said, there's a vast history of the 1808, circa 1808 date. We are really trying to pinpoint that, especially with the state application. And so far we have, there's several references to that date. We're thinking it's because Jonas Williams on the title is the first listed owner of the property in 1808. And at that time, he was also building the mill. So it may be that he put up a structure to live in so he could be close to that project. Also on the title, when it transfers in 1818 to the Isaac Bowman, it's listed, it jumps to a phenomenal amount of money for that time of $2,000. So we're trying to kind of go back and put those pieces together. That would tell us there was most likely already a structure on it. It was also listed as a mortgage and not just a warranty deed. So we're thinking that Jonas Williams just put up a structure so that he could be close to the mill as it was being built. Of course, I don't know if you've read through it, but the history is very deep with the Bigelow family as well. That was most of the documentation my aunt collected was from the Bigelow family, the ancestors of, because that was a very interesting period of time. This was a nursery. It was Bigelow, a nursery. There were orchards. Naturally, everybody who knows the history, and I'm not preaching to the choir here, but you know the history of the village. So she kept a lot of that documentation, as well as all the articles that were in the Courier Express and the Bee, and everybody knows it's been on the Williamsville, New York global tour, guided tour, and on maps for years as being historic. The only other thing, I think that was just about everything I wanted to review. If you have any questions on the documentation or the Bigelow family, I mean, it's a lot of it is in there. There are several references to his history, the history of the Bigelows, whose great-great-grandfather, oops, I lost it. I have a Google screen. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay, whose great-great-grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War at Valley Forge. So it goes back, historically, there's quite a significance in the residence as well as in the structure.
Well, Mrs. Hunt, thank you very much for the work that you've done and bring it to us for consideration. If I may ask, what has been your personal motivation for doing this?
We have wanted to do this for several years. My husband and I talked about it in the late 90s after we moved here, especially after our friend had done the paper. And it just seemed a little daunting at the time. And two college, two students at South heading to college, just timing. So that the time was not there. It seemed a little daunting. Things roll on and, work, life gets in the way. And so we talked about it again a few years ago, and I looked at it quickly and thought, oh, I don't know, I got to do all this, take pictures. And then I thought, if I don't do this now, the history of this home may be lost forever. And I'm not a spring chicken. I'm not getting any younger. So I just thought it was time. I had the time with the shutdown, to be honest. I had all the documentation for all these years. And with this time on my hands, I dove into it and said, this is something I wanted to do for a long time. Now's the time to do it. And then I can preserve it for my children. I have grandchildren, children that someday may own this house themselves. If we can manage to pass it through the family, my goal is 100 years in our family. We're almost there. We've got a good 70, just about 71. So that's a goal. And so I wanted to do that and have it documented for posterity and for my family. And because I know my aunt would want me to do it. My aunt was very close to my aunt. She was my godmother. And I know deep down inside, she would want me to do this to keep the house relevant in the village, because she was all about the village and keeping it more on the historic side and not too commercial, which we're getting there, but keeping it more on the historic side and the historic beauty of it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, this is Chuck Akers here, and I've had the same problem you've had, a lot of time on my hands, so I've been searching a lot on the computer. But I came across an article written in '97 that talks about the early stone houses of Amherst.
Yes.
And your house is mentioned in that. And one of the things that they said, which is interesting, that in the census of 1855, there were 33 stone houses in Amherst. And you're listed one of them, and there's only 16 left in 1997.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, we're a dying breed. we don't. So I think it's important that we do preserve it.
Does anyone else have any more comments?
Well, I'm curious,
No.
how many residential properties not connected with the district do we have?
We have the Dream Castle.
Yes.
We have the Stone Schoolhouse, which I believe is also listed on in Chuck LaCusa's website. This is Kate Waterman Culprit. Try to identify yourselves when you guys talk for the minutes for that. The Stone Schoolhouse on South Cayuga, that's also listed as one of the stone buildings that are still remaining in Amherst. Jump in for me, anyone, if you.
Yeah, there's quite a few residences still left.
Mill Street. We have one on Mill, I believe.
There's a couple on Mill. There's one on Mill that's covered with stucco, and then there's 2 or 3 more.
I mean, jump in with if we have any other residential local landmarks.
Yes.
That have been
that's-
designated, no.
That was the
So
question.
I
Yeah,
think there's
No.
2, so this would be a third.
got it.
Right.
Thank you. It's important. Yeah.
It is. And if you go to that website for stone buildings in Amherst, you'll see that I was surprised. I had no idea. And they really piqued my interest when I started looking at them. So some of them are quite impressive. You drive by them all the time, but you don't think, hey, there's some gorgeous stone under the stucco. So the next thing I'd like to do, thank you very much, Mrs. Hunt.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Kate, I just wanted to mention, this is Jim Tamaro. I may have a photograph in these digitized photographs of this house from 1955, which Ms. Hunt might be interested in. I'll check and see.
Oh, thank you. I would be. Yes, thank you very much.
It's always
This is
great to add information to the record. So any information anyone finds, I mean, this is the most extensive submission I've ever seen for a single property. So very well done, Mrs. Hunt. I'll be, I'll be happy to recommend this for local landmarking in just a minute. But first, I think the group
Thank you.
need to look for the criteria in which we would be submitting this local designation. So if you haven't looked through, if you don't have your code up, maybe you have your design standards, which on page 164, it starts with the designation of historical landmarks, historic sites, and historic districts. So we are looking for a local historic landmark, which we all know is a property. That's how we designate things in the village. And now we're looking for the criteria in which we are going to recommend to the Board of Trustees that they accept this local landmark nomination form. So we've got, the commission may recommend designation of a group of properties. No, that's not it. Let me get to the right thing here. So they meet one or more of the criteria for designation in a landmark.
It's 47.4, Kate, if you're looking at the code, or are you looking at the design standards?
I am in 47.4. So I'm just trying.
It's also in the application on.
Do you want me to read it?
Oh, we can look at the application too. Yeah, if you want to, that would be great. Which number is it? It's 47-4 C.
A. No, it's A is the commission may recommend designation of an individual property as a landmark, subject to village board approval if it, one, is associated with the lives of individuals or of people or of events significant in the national, state, or local history. Two, embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, a period, or a method of construction. Three, represents a work of a master architect or designer or possesses high artistic values. Four, represents a significant or distinguished entity whose components may lack individual or special distinction. Or five, because of a unique location or singular physical characteristic, represents an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Chip. Okay, so I would say from the documentation submitted that I would recommend this become a local landmark for one, because it's associated with the lives of individuals or people in local history. Does anyone disagree?
No,
No.
I have additional comment, Kate.
Sure.
On the criteria about being part of a structure in a historic period, in this article that I mentioned in 1997, it said that the stone houses in Amherst were in the period of 1800 to 1845. And then the shift of houses went away from stone more into the wooden houses because wood was more available. So that, I think, would qualify under that, I think, the third criteria.
Mrs. Hunt, this is Tony Bannon again. What is the name of the distinguished artist who's living in the
My
house now?
uncle- Oh, no, my uncle Victor Ori, he's since passed.
I see.
He lived here, my aunt and uncle lived here, and he was, I have actually several of his paintings still. but he worked with Charles Birchfield and several of those artists of that time. And he was a familiar art person in the area.
I didn't catch his last name. Mrs.
Ori-
Hunt,
Yes.
say it again.
Aures, Ori.
Oh, yes, I know.
Could you say that last name again? You're really hard to hear.
I'm sorry, Ores, Aures.
Okay.
Yeah, he was associated with the Birchfield. That's
Yes,
right.
he was.
Hmm.
Dr. Bannon here was also associated with Birchfield, so he's well versed with that.
Oh, I would love to show you. I would love to show you some of the stuff I have that my uncle did. Some of the illustration for some very prominent families in the area that we saved.
Oh, it'd be an honor. Thank you.
You might be interested anytime.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, then we'll look at criteria 2. Embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, a period, or a method of construction. What is everyone feeling?
Yeah, this goes at the construction of the period of 1800 to mid-century was a stone houses predominantly. And then that changed after the 1845 roughly.
I think I would agree with that, Chuck. This is Kate, that the method of stone construction is an important key factor here for the 1808 property, or portion of the property. I wouldn't want to conclude or exclude the 1866 portion. So I think we can look at this as a whole because it's an evolution through time. But I think we can pull the masonry construction portion as being a distinctive characteristic because there are so few left. Would anyone disagree?
No, I agree.
Oh, sounds good to me.
I agree.
Okay, let's move on to 3. Represents a work of master architect or designer or possesses high artistic value. We don't want to offend you, Christine, but we're not going to go for this criteria. So we're going to go with 1 and 2 so far. We're going to skip 3.
I knew that one wasn't going to fly.
All right. Does anyone disagree with what I just said?
No.
Okay, we'll go on to number 4. Represents a significant or distinguished entity whose components may lack individual or special distinction.
I think the ability to tie it possibly to the Underground Railroad is important. And I think, again, being a stone house and being connected to the Bigelow farm, I think is really important as well.
I think I would agree with that. Maybe I'm confused by the wording of this one because we don't normally go for number 4. Represents a significant or distinguished entity whose components may lack individual or special distinction. Chip, do you agree with the statement by Mary that the Underground Railroad
I guess it can. I'll be honest with you, I don't have any tremendous insight on what exactly that criteria is supposed to be getting at. Like you said, that is generally that hasn't been one that's really come up too much. So I don't have a legal opinion on that. I think Mary may be interpreting that reasonably.
Well, what I found is that there's very little to back up Underground Railroad usage because it was illegal. Nobody wrote anything down because if you got caught, you would get thrown in jail. And the reality is this was a very active area for Underground Railroad. And I think that, the Eagle House makes those claims. A couple of different houses have made those claims. We found a 4th basement at the mill when we owned it that we thought was probably connected to the Underground Railroad, but you can't prove it because there is no written proof. and we don't have oral proof either. So, you know, you can look at it as saying it's a possible site, but there's no proof that there is or isn't.
If someone in who lives in the village who is working with a group, I think in Niagara County, on this very topic. She just completed her master's kind of in this subject area, writing her thesis, I believe, about this. So I think I will reach out to her and maybe connect her with Mrs. Hunt and see if there's an opportunity to explore that avenue further. Maybe she has some more insight as to maybe how Mrs. Hunt could go about proofing this.
Yeah, great.
More claim to
Years ago, I was in the Eagle House, and Jack, who owned the Eagle House, showed me supposedly a tunnel in the basement of the Eagle House that went under the creek over to the mill, and that's how they got to the mill, and then took out like a creek up to the Niagara River. So supposedly there is. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been down there. Years ago, there was supposedly. I mean, I saw it. They showed me a tunnel in the basement of the Eagle House.
Yeah, it's blocked off now, but.
And by the way,
go ahead.
Sorry, this is Chip, and I just want to be clear that I wasn't commenting on the issue of whether or not there's a credible or substantiated claim that this is linked to the Underground Railroad. I have absolutely no opinion on that. I was more trying to give an opinion, I guess, or interpret what this number 4 criteria is trying to get at.
Okay.
And what I was saying that you know, that certainly if there is a credible claim on that, I think that the fact that if this house were to be linked to the Underground Railroad, that could certainly be considered a distinguished entity. It certainly wouldn't have been in the 1840s, 1850s, but in historical context, certainly. So at any rate, I'm just, all I was saying was that if that's what the board is viewing that criteria as getting at, some sort of connection to some sort of historical organization or movement or something like that. I just don't know what the end of that clause, how that relates to the beginning of it, but at any rate, that's all I was trying to say.
Okay, thank you, Chip. Okay, so how does the commission feel about number 4 then, in relation to the previous discussion? Is that something we want to pursue in the local landmark nomination, assuming the commission would like to local landmark this property? Or is it something that we don't have enough proof on and we're just going to skip over on its nomination?
Well, there's no actual proof. Maybe that's something we should look for a grant in the future to try and identify sites in the village that are possibly linked to that. And that might be a good thing to do.
Well, let's
Might be
see.
a great thing to do, just to reach out to the public and use that maybe
Right.
educational tool to say, hey, do you think your home or building was part of the Underground Railroad?
Right. But I think there's no proof actually.
Right. But a story could be developed.
Let's see.
You know.
The professor at the university who gave an opinion about the hidden wall or door, Mrs. Hunt, who was that?
That was during a, I don't know if it was something to do with the 1997 study that you referenced, but it was an individual who came in with 2 other women, and I believe it was the Stone Structure Group. And when they looked in the basement, that intrigued them. That was very interesting to them. But it was also noted, it has been for many, since I was a child, it has been said that this was the stone house portion, and part of the wooden house portion was used to hide slaves. And the 1997 research paper that our friend did also references this on page 3, as Harry Bigelow wrote for the Amherst Bee, under the pen name Aborigine, and it was a known abolitionist, and that is why it was believed that he assisted with the Underground Railroad.
Well, towards establishing a proof, the research that the professor from the university, presumably with a terminal degree, would have some authority. If we could find out who that professor was, Mrs. Hunt, that might be helpful.
There's the one thing that I didn't get a lot of documentation on when we were doing it, when they were coming through, because it was just a collaborative thing. We went to a slideshow afterwards, and they showed all the homes that they came in and visited. But I don't know how official it was, but I will, again, rack my brain and try to see if and my records, and see if I can find. I know I did sign on a waiver, and see if I can find that.
Great, thank you.
I'd agree with Mary. If there's not really proof, I would shy away from that. I mean, it's a nice theory, but you know, want to stick to things you can prove, probably.
Yeah, I agree.
And by the way, again, not to get too hung up on this, but certainly if it were, I mean, again, if you were to determine that there was a credible link there or reason to believe, I think that would also certainly fall under criteria 1 as well as potentially 4. I'm still struggling, to be honest with you, what exactly 4 is supposed to mean.
I don't understand it myself. I don't think we've ever nominated something based on 4 before, and I don't know if anything is in our local landmark list that even has 4 in it. So, okay, so we'll move on to 5 then. Because of a unique location or singular physical characteristic represents an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. I know what I'm thinking. Anybody else want to jump in? Because
What
of
are you thinking?
I'm thinking part of it falls under 5.
unique location or singular physical characteristic represents an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood.
That last part, Kate, that's what I'm starting to say hooks into that structure.
Right, a familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. I think if you describe this house to anybody who's familiar with the village, they're gonna know which one you're talking about. It's not a regular cookie cutter house on that street.
I totally agree with that, Kate. And it's along the line, I mean, you have so many stone houses, maybe not on that street, but over on Mill, so.
Does anyone disagree?
Nope.
Okay, so it looks like we're gonna go with 1, 2, and 5 as the criterion that we would like to propose this as local landmark, not as a local landmark.
Kate, this is Chuck Akers.
What's that?
This is Chuck Akers speaking. I am concerned that we're not doing the Underground Railroad, but because there was not a lot published about it, documented records, because if you did, you went to jail for a long time or got shot or hung in certain cases. How are you going to prove this thing where there is the underlying unproven documentation of this is the family lore that has been passed down generation to generation on this house? I think that we should include it for that reason and then continue doing the research. But we're looking at the local designation on this thing, not the national registry, which could ask for actual proof on this sort of thing. But I think it'd be worth commenting about that in our application as a local landmark, because I think it's important.
Well, you could call it a suspected Underground Railroad stop.
Well, I would propose this, and I'm just one voice here, that, as Chuck said, this is a local nomination. The impact of stating that it's a possible Underground Railroad site gives it no more protection than the other criterion that we are already looking at. So if we were to exclude that from this nomination, and because the Underground Railroad was a state and national issue as well, and this owner has stated that they are going for state and national register nomination as well, or listing as well, then that could be worked out with the state and national. And we could exclude it from this nomination so that we only have accurate information. And it's something that could always be revisited later on if more information was found. What do you feel about that, Chuck?
That's okay.
I would
Yeah,
agree,
it's fine.
Kate. You know, it strikes me as there's certain parts in the city of Buffalo that are part of the Underground Railroad. And despite it being against the law and all those kind of things, I suspect they probably do have some documentation for some of that in the city of Buffalo.
There, Kate, there's something to be said of the oral tradition of passing fact and wisdom through generations. And if we were to just simply say that, I think Chuck's selection of words was apt, that this is a part of the oral tradition of the community. That we make no decision about ultimate fact in that regard. We say simply that it's part of the oral tradition, and that's worthy.
I like the way you say it, Tony. I think I'm
Yeah.
anyone else?
Yeah, that's true. Oral history holds a lot of sway with history. It can be unproven, but if there's an oral history handed down, that can be used as a verification because many people couldn't read or write. So they had only oral histories to go with.
You could phrase it that way. And then there's enough wiggle room that, you know, we're not saying we have proof, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you, all three of you.
Kate?
Yes.
Can I just say thank you to those gentlemen? Because I appreciate their interpretation of it being the oral history, and it has been the oral history since my mother was a child, since my aunt and uncle purchased it in 1949. So it came with the house, and so I really appreciate that interpretation because I always thought that it was important and an important element of the house. So, thank you.
Can I ask, is that relatable to number 4 of the criteria? Or, so you're saying that
We're
number
gonna
1?
skip, no, we're gonna do the Underground Railroad oral history portion as part of 1, I believe.
Of part of 1, okay.
Because it's the national, state, and local history, and we'll talk when we write up our nomination after our public hearing. That's where the board would like to go with this. Then, or the commission would like to go with this to recommend to the village board. Then we will write up language or its oral history. But I think it needs to stay with national, state, and local history. So we'll still go with 1, 2, and 5.
Okay.
I move
Okay.
we recommend to the board to pass this as a local recommendation.
So would you, so maybe the motion could be that we move this to public hearing for a nomination as a local landmark under criterion 1, 2, and 5.
I'll second that.
So that was Chuck Akers that made the motion, Jim Tamaro that seconded, and then all in favor. Can we do a roll call vote, Deb?
Sure, so that was a motion by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Tamaro. It was moved to recommend that the HPC hold a public hearing.
For the nomination of
Nomination, the local nomination.
75 Evans Street as a local landmark.
Okay,
Recommending it for designation. And then the next thing that they're going to need to do is then schedule the public hearing.
okay, for designation. Okay. As
We'll do a
local,
roll call vote.
And so we'll do a roll call on that motion. Ms. Culpa,
Yes.
Mr. Akers,
Yes.
Mr. Stone,
Yes.
Ms. Lowther,
Yes.
Mr. Bannon,
Yes,
Mr. Tamaro,
Yes.
Ms. Garrett,
Is Miss Garrett
I'm
on
not
the,
sure that my,
You know, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I don't think mine
Emily
counts.
can't vote yet. She has not been formally
Yeah.
appointed to the commission yet.
okay, all right, so that would be it then. So we have 6 yes to 0.
does anyone vote not in favor of the proposal? Okay, then all in favor, then we said aye, and I believe that motion is done. So, Mrs. Hunt, we will now schedule the public hearing or propose a date for a public hearing. I think we're doing that via Zoom. We haven't done one of these yet, but I think the village board has already done some. So I'm not sure about the village schedule. There, with Memorial Day, I think some meetings were moved around.
Chip, how long do we have to do it?
So under the law, it's just a question of, I mean, what I would recommend is you schedule it for your next meeting. That'll give
Okay.
plenty of time. I mean, the issue, so here's the thing. It's a little, the village clerk needs to send the notice of the proposed designation to the owners of the properties 30 days prior to the public hearing. So
Okay.
the earliest really it could be done is like 31 days from now, assuming that the village clerk forwards that tomorrow. Obviously, and this is a self-nomination, so the applicant, but that is, you know, is present, but that's what the code requires, is that the notice be sent at least 30 days prior to the public hearing.
Okay, so that would be June 23rd, a Tuesday evening. So, Keaton, if you could please publicize that. How about we do 7 p.m. for the public hearing? And that way, if we do have other business that evening, which we will, then we can start the meeting earlier if we so choose, but we'll do 7 o'clock for the public hearing.
So Kate, are you gonna draft up? How do you normally do it? Because Judy's gonna is gonna have to send the notice out. Is that something that does she prepare or
Prepares
your
it.
nomination? Who does?
Judy does.
Okay.
She could refer to the notice that she sent out for the landscape stone, the stone landscape features a few months
Okay, but she's
ago.
gonna need a description, I think, from this commission
Right.
to draft that notice.
Yes.
And then somebody's going to put the link to the Zoom meeting on the website. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's correct. It'll also have to go in the public notice too. So it'll be there, and it will also.
It's possible.
Okay.
Sorry, Keith. By
It's
the way,
okay.
it's possible that it's possible that by June 23rd, meetings will actually be in person. I wouldn't hold my breath on that, but right now, it's only public hearings through the end of May that are prohibited to be in person. So we may be able to make that determination closer to the meeting, although we got to send the notice out. So I'm gonna have to actually give that a little bit of thought.
Do you
We
know
actually
something
may have to commit.
you're not telling us?
What's that?
Do you know something you're not telling us, Chuck?
No, believe me, I don't. That's the problem. But because we need to send the notice out 30 days in advance, I think we may have to commit one way or the other, because the notice is going to have to say whether it's in person or the safe thing to do is to have it remote.
Yeah, I was actually just going to suggest that we could do it remote no matter what.
Right.
It's easy to do. We already have access to it. So
I would do that.
yeah, and if in person works out, then it does. And Zoom can still be
Right.
a
That's
second.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, Keaton. If it becomes safe to hold it in person and we do that, then we still just run the Zoom concurrently. But if, I mean,
And
if it's-
safe will, you know, not everyone may feel safe at that point, because that is
Right.
very far.
Right.
So to have
Very
the
true.
option of Zoom, no matter what, you know, is appropriate.
Yep.
Okay, so
Can I-
that is scheduled. Keaton's going to post. Judy will write up the notice, but I can help her with the language. We're going criterion 1, 2, and 5. Number 1 is based on, sorry, I closed my book here. But just to give her a tiny bit of background so we're all on the same page, that number 1 is based on the Bigelow, the ownership of the Bigelow family. Christine, do we talk about, you talked about the owners of the mill as well?
Yeah, Jonas Williams, who built the original mill. One of his name is the first landowner on title landowner for this property. Of course, that happened all over the village, but he was also at the same time building the mill. So
He wasn't the builder of the property. He wasn't builder of the 1808 stone portion, was he?
we don't know. We were always told that he was.
Well,
So-
I'm sorry, when did he go out of title? I mean, when his ownership of that property, I mean, I'm assuming he probably owned a big chunk of Evans Street at one
He
point.
did. Yeah, he owned everything. Yeah, they owned everything.
Yeah.
Uh,
But can you tell from your abstract of title when
Yes.
this parcel came out of his ownership?
Yes, 1812. So,
Okay, so we assume that the house was already built in 1808 and the fluctuation was only till 1812 or was it 1810 when the improvement was probably made because of the land increase, the land value increase?
1818, there was the land value increased to 2,000 when it was
Okay,
after Jonas Williams deeded it to Isaac Bowman, and then in 1818 it was mortgaged to Joseph Ellicott, back to Joseph Ellicott, and that was the point where the price increased to $2,000. So we're, like I said, we are trying to work on pinpointing that date of build. And the reason we're tying it into the 1808 is because of the time that Jonas Williams held it and that the mill was being built that same time.
Have you ever gotten copies of all those deeds from back then?
I have, yeah, I have.
I know the title report, but sometimes you need to look at the actual deed to see what property is described, because I bet that 1808 deed is half the village.
Yeah, I think it is.
It probably is because,
Okay.
Jonas Williams owned from
They bought the square mile or
down to
whatever.
Sheridan and over to, the mill
Yeah.
and then some.
Okay. I just know, and even that $2,000 price seems pretty high for land back then. I lived on North Ellicott Street for a long time, at 33 North Ellicott. And my house, in 1843, the lot itself was split out and sold for $60. And then 8 years later, it was sold for $550. So that's when we're guessing when that house was built. So $2,000 in early 1800 seems like a lot of money for just a single family lot, unless that included part of the orchard and all that. But
Right.
that's why if you had the actual deed, maybe see what was described in the deed of how much property was there.
And I haven't had an opportunity to look at any of this, and I may never need to look at it, but I'm just looking at obviously this property was listed in the reconnaissance level survey in 1997. And it didn't purport to pinpoint, but it said circa 1820.
Yes.
Yeah, but so if I understand what you're saying, you think it's earlier because of that $2,000 transaction
Yeah. This
happened a
little
decade or
chunk
so
that-
earlier.
This little book says 1820, so I think that's probably where the reconnaissance got their date. This just says
Yeah.
1820.
Yeah. There's always been that dispute between 1808 and 1820.
Yeah.
It's been Schuyler, I can't think of reference to Schuyler 93. I
Mhm.
think that was the 1808 reference.
Okay.
But it's been referenced, I mean, just again, through the oral history of the family, 1808, all because of the Jonas Williams connection.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the blue form that was listed as part of the Erie County Historic Resource Survey, which was done in, can't tell what year this was done, but it is listing 1810 as the date. Through the assessor's records at the Amherst Town Hall and the Amherst Archives at the Amherst Museum. This is listed on the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO's CRIS, Cultural Resource Information System. Right now, this document is linked to the address of 75 Evans Street. And I'm just scanning it up here. Actually, can you share my screen, Keaton?
Keaton stepped away, Kate. So this is John. I'm
You-
a co-host. Are you still there, Keaton? If not, let me see if I can get you to.
Kate, just try to hit share screen yourself. I think you may have already be set up to do that.
Okay.
So at the bottom, in the middle of the bottom, if you hit
I
share
can't-
screen.
It says you cannot start sharing screens while others participate in sharing.
Okay. Here, try now. I unchecked that box.
Hey, tell me if you guys can see a greenish blue screen.
No, we're still seeing the agenda.
No.
Well, maybe I have to click share screen again.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay,
Yep.
try now. I stopped sharing his, so try now.
Does anyone see this?
I just see you, Kate.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Can you request to screen share? I can see if I can see where that pops up.
oh, now select the window you want to share. Share.
there we go.
Can everybody
Now it's
see
working.
this?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, so this is part of the Erie County Historic Resource Survey that is in the Cultural Resource Information System by SHPO. And this is called the blue form, a building structure inventory form. They don't have these, they don't use this form anymore, but this is how everything was inputted many, many moons ago. They only switched over from not using this a couple, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. But so Andrea Shaw at 500 Smith Road, which I believe is the Buffalo Niagara Heritage Village, the old Amherst Museum.
Andrea was a town historian. She was a museum director.
Oh, great. So she prepared this for the county. And I'll scan to the
Worked with Andrea many years ago.
This is Chuck Akers, but if you go back to the beginning of that form, Kate,
Mhm.
If you look at the materials under description, it says it's clapboard and a brick house.
Well, that's obviously incorrect. It's stone.
Well, yeah.
So these forms are filled out cursory drive-by eye. They are not meant to be in-depth research. It's simply, here's what you see. But if you look under structural system, it says masonry load-bearing walls. So here we go. So here under 19, significant dates of initial construction, they estimated it at 1810. And the historical and architectural importance at the time of this document was in 1890, John Blocher, prominent Buffalo businessman and philanthropist, owned the house and property. He deeded 40 acres of this farm for a residence for the elderly called Blocher Homes. This is the second oldest house in Amherst. It is a fine example of a simple Federalist style house. The first owner was Jonas Williams, founder of Williamsville. Also, the house was owned by Harry Foster Bigelow in 1866, who wrote early columns in the Amherst Bee under the pen name Aborigine, and who also established the first arboretum in Amherst. So I don't know. I'm not sure if. Not sure. Christine?
See the sources that says Amherst Archives? I actually worked on the town of Amherst Archives. And when I was working in the town clerk's office years ago, transcribed the first 2 volumes of the records of the town of Amherst. And if the museum should still have one of the transcription copies. You could look through that and it maybe make mention of the structure in those transcribed minutes.
Yeah, we could, that might be available to us, right? If it's at the museum.
Years ago, I deposited a copy of those at the Amherst Museum and also each of the local libraries. Now, whether they still have them in the local history collection, I don't know. But I think I still have a copy in my garage of these. But yeah, I spent years, couple of years transcribing like 50 years of the town's records from 1810 to about 1850. And so the museum's supposed to have 2 volumes of the transcription. So there might be something in there about the structure.
Mhm.
Okay, so what do we need to actually ask for? What do we ask the town for, Jim?
Ask them and see if somebody has the transcription of the early records of the town of Amherst.
Are we asking the Amherst Museum or the town?
Well, the town clerk's office should have a copy of it also. Whether they do or not, I mean, it's been decades, of course, since I've been out of there. But the museum is supposed to have it. I think years ago, I saw them in the library, the library of the Amherst Museum. They were there. Now, whether they're still there, I don't know.
Say it again. Transcription of the.
Yeah, it was. I titled it "Early Records of the Town of Amherst," and it was a transcription of the volumes. I mean, the last couple of years I was in the town clerk's office, I had enough time to methodically read through these handwritten minutes and methodically typed up this stuff. And so it was easy for people to read this instead of having to try to read the script and stuff. And I gave copies to Andrea to put out at the museum. So I think the last time I saw them, which was many years ago, they were in the library of the Amherst Museum. If you go to the Amherst Museum, they have a library. Look for the early records of the town of Amherst transcriptions.
Mhm.
They should be there.
So what is the relation to the Blocher, to John Blocher with his property? I guess this is the first time I'm seeing this.
Before the village was around, the assessments might be listed in these records. These were records that were not only minutes of the town board meetings, they were like all sorts of stuff. They were fines for people that let their animals run loose. They were fence sitters, people that made sure the fences were up so that your sheep weren't running all over the place, or your goats and stuff. And there were all sorts of things. And there were the election of all the town officials. And I mean, originally the town of Amherst town board met once a year. And in like an hour or two, they decided everything for the entire year. And so it's a collection of all sorts of records. Some of it might be the assessments for properties in there. I don't know specifically, but that's why I titled it Early Records of the Town of Amherst, because it's not only the town board meetings, it's a collection of all sorts of stuff.
Oh, Kate, I mean, subject to what those records may say, assuming you can locate them. The way I read what that says about Blocher, Blocher owned it in the late 19th century and apparently owned this property at issue 75. At the time, he owned basically the entire, I think, east side of Evans Street, and he sold the chunk that off to to become what is now Bloker Homes.
Okay, so you're reading it as, so Christine, do you have any record in the title search, that John Bloker owned this house in like 1890s?
Yes, it was actually lost in foreclosure. Mary Bigelow lost it in foreclosure to John Bloker in 1890.
Okay, that makes sense then why this was on here.
And the other person that you might want to talk to is Jennifer Meldrum, who runs the Town of Amherst Archives and Record Center. If they got them out there, Jennifer would know where they are. If not, I would look in the library at the Amherst Museum.
If we could ever get back in, yes, we could do that.
Yeah, I really.
So, okay. That's part of this whole collection thing, you know, so we moved to go to public hearing. We're still collecting more information. So I think I can reach out to the Amherst Museum and see if anyone is even working at their facility and see if there's even an opportunity to try and get something from their records. And I can also try to reach out to the town clerk's office or a Jennifer Meldrum, and she would be at the town. Jim, would I call the town to talk to her?
Jennifer works at the Record Center on Millersport Highway, which is that old Nike missile site base. And I think Jennifer told me when I was working with her and digitizing these photographs, the archives have been moved to the Harlem Road Community Center. So the business records of the town, about 3,000 cubic feet, are out at this Record Center, which was old Nike missile site based on Millersport and Smith. But I think they moved the archives to a room in the Harlem Road Community Center. But Jennifer Meldrum is the one. You could call the clerk's office and ask, what's the phone number for Jennifer out at the Record Center? And you can tell her I suggest you call her.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, if you were to green light it, I could contact the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center.
That's who I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
One of their people, Christine, lives over here in the village.
You're doing okay.
Okay, good.
So if you want to make contact with them, there is a local connection there already. So that would be
Yeah. Good. And her name is, say it again?
I'm trying to remember her last name. I haven't worked with her in a couple of years. Her first name is Christine.
Okay, good. They're associated with the National Heritage Areas Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And they connect also with the Castellani Museum and the Underground Railroad Trail Research. So, you know, I don't know if there's anything that they discovered about Williamsville, but I'd like to ask the question if you're not on it.
Yeah, that would be great, Tony. If you could take that off my plate, that would be wonderful.
Good, I'll do it.
Hey,
Thanks.
one other thought I had was, of course, in this environment, I don't even know if Jennifer's working. I'm not sure what level of employment there is in the town right now.
I would be very surprised if she's working. I mean, all the municipalities are under a mandate right now to reduce their in-person work forces by 50%. I'm guessing archivists and records management people are
Battery's running low.
most likely to be the people who are
Watch
Yes,
it,
not
Jack,
to work.
watch it.
not
Right.
because the work's not important, but just because, you know, they're not police officers and
So
firefighters.
2 archivists that are working right now in different settings. So it's quite possible that she's working telecommuting. So I'll reach out and see if we can get any additional information. We have a month. We'll see what starts opening up. Keep gathering information before we make our final recommendation to the town board. So, okay, I think we've got with this as well. I'm just gonna take a screenshot here. With this as well, I think that we've got you know, more information to add to this. And for criteria 1, 2, and 5, we can get a meaty nomination if that's how the commission wants to move forward after the public hearing that we can recommend to the town board. So
Kate,
Yes.
just a couple things. So again, I want to make sure we had an issue with that wall with the SBL issue. So let's make sure that we're describing the property accurately. I haven't seen the application materials. Do we actually have like the SBL number as well as the address so that we?
We do.
Okay, all right.
So, can you see the SBL, Deb?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm just gonna read it off to you.
Yeah.
It's 142201,
142201.
and that's usually not part of the SBL, but then it's 69.17 dash 5-4.
Okay, 69.17 what?
Dash 5-4.
Dash 5-4.
Yes.
Okay,
And as I mentioned to the village, there is a copy of this in the building department's bin or at the building department if it's already been collected by Tim.
okay. And are we going to leave it that you are going to connect with Judy for the proper wording for the public hearing?
Yeah, I can contact. I got it on my agenda for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
It'll happen tomorrow, but I've got it on my agenda for tomorrow.
Kate,
Yes, Jim.
here's one other thing. If you talk to Jennifer, you could also look at, because I know this exists, there's an assessment roll from 1924.
You know what I'm going to suggest, Jim?
What?
Can you take
I talked to her.
call Jennifer?
I'll try to pursue. All right, I'll try to pursue it. Maybe I'll get in the museum and see if I can get in the library too. All right.
The museum, I know the director from being on the Amherst Preservation Commission, so she is one of our resource people over there. So
All right. Why don't you take the
if you
museum?
contact, I can get you on there.
Why don't you?
Who might be working?
Museum, and I will talk to Jennifer. All right, put me down for that.
Okay. And then if you need any help, though, just call me or text me or something, and we'll figure it out.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. So Jim's gonna call that. I'm gonna talk to Judy. Perfect. Okay. Are we comfortable? I think we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's for this, moving to public hearing and making the motion to nominate for the public hearing. So why don't we move on the agenda? Can we go back to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully we'll go back. Maybe John, maybe you could bring that up if Keaton's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I have her here. One second.
Okay, now we can see you, Kate.
Okay, so we're going to move on with the agenda. Thank you, John.
Yep.
So the next item is Newberry Salad. Is anyone on the line for Newberry Salad? Okay, we're going to table. I'll make a motion to table 5409 Main Street Newberry Salad for their certificate of appropriateness review. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was Jim. And all in favor? Jim
Aye.
seconded it?
Aye.
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 Does anybody vote against the motion? Okay, that was unanimously approved. Share Kitchen and Bar, 5590 Main Street. Is anyone here this evening? Okay, Dave Sutton reached out to me and said that Joel has putting this on pause. They're working with Tim on how long an approval would last if they were looking to get something. Tim has commented back to Dave, but Dave said no one would be here this evening to talk about it. So we'll make a motion to table this as well. Share Kitchen and Bar 5590 Main Street for the certificate of appropriateness review. I made the motion to table. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was a second by Anthony Bannon, and all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That was unanimously approved. Moving on to the South Cayuga Road Historic District. This goes hand in hand with the residential design standards. So would anyone like to discuss anything for the South Cayuga Historic Road or Historic District?
I move this be tabled.
Chuck moves that it's be tabled. Does anyone have any discussion? I have discussion. It was, Mr. E2 mentioned to me that he has been being asked by the residents if this matter would be moved on by the HPC, and asking for a time frame. I told him I didn't have a time frame as of yet, because people wanted to make improvements on their property. Now, improvements could mean exactly the opposite of what an HPC might like to see on that property. So I just want to throw that out there to the commission, that, you know, people, I guess, are going to try to make modifications to their homes in lieu of an HPC acting on this matter. So we have a motion on the table, or motion to table this item.
Second.
What's that?
I have a question.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Well, we have a question on the table.
If we have not moved on it, my understanding was we weren't going to until we had residential design standards put together.
Right.
And my understanding is they discussed that at the village board meeting the other night, and that was brought up about residential design standards. And Matt told the board that it would be a substantial amount of time before we actually did them. And he didn't say anything about people wanting to make improvements. But when I watched it, or when I listened to the recording, it sounded like the board was okay with the fact that they were waiting for the residential design standards in order for us to move on to South Cayuga. But in the meantime, we have nominated it, so that stops any action.
We have nominated it.
No,
I don't think we have.
Nope.
I think so. Yeah, we tabled it.
We have never nominated it.
No.
No.
Okay, then my mistake. I misunderstood. I thought we had. Then they're free to do it until we nominate it,
Yes.
unless we pass residential design standards, right?
This commission's
Well,
attitude has been that we are, up until now, and maybe now, because we're talking about this right now, that we weren't going to move, we didn't have support to move forward with this item as far as nomination for public hearing, as long as the residential design standards had not been updated.
Right, because really, we can't tell the people what to expect unless the design standards are in place.
Right. So if we're comfortable tabling this for this evening, then we have a motion to table, and Jim can re-second that after you're done speaking, or unless there's any other discussion, and then we could move forward with the agenda.
You have discussion, Kate?
Does anyone else have any discussion?
No.
Okay, and Jim, would you like to re-second that?
Sure, I will second that motion.
Okay, so all in favor of tabling the South Cayuga Road Historic District item for this evening? So,
Say aye.
aye.
Yes.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we're gonna table that, move on. We're gonna go to historic plaques. We left off that, let me look at the meeting minutes. Here.
I thought we approved this. I thought this was all set, no?
We did approve it. I gave Judy all the information, and the last I knew, she was going to order them.
Okay, so we're just waiting then. John, do you have any update possibly for this item?
Do I have any update?
No, John,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Trustee Murphy.
I don't have any update. Excuse me, sorry.
I don't think
can't
it's-
remember where we left off. I don't think we just really discussed or talked about that too much.
Okay. So I'm gonna talk to Judy in the next couple of days. So why don't I ask her about that as well?
Okay, because she had the money in the budget, and she had all the information. So it should have, I thought it had gone forward.
Okay. All right, then moving on, the CLG report. I need resumes. We didn't submit for a round of funding, so we didn't submit, I don't think, our CLG report. I will talk to Judy about that as well. But could everyone please pass me the resumes? If you haven't already. So this is another plea for resumes.
And by the way, while we're talking about resumes, we particularly, the village board needs Emily's resume to.
Who gets the resume?
Well, you can send them to Kate, but
Send them to Kate? Okay.
for purposes of formally nominating, that was the holdup last night with the board nominating Emily.
Okay, I'll send it. Did I hear to send it to Kate?
Yeah, you can send it to Kate and then Kate can forward it to John or however you want to do that. But
Okay.
just so that was the only thing that held up your your being appointed last night.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Thank you.
But to be clear, Emily's will not be included in the CLG report because it was for last fiscal year.
Yep, I only mentioned it because you mentioned resumes and I remembered that was an issue last night. So
Thank you.
it was an opportune time to mention it.
Thank you, Kate.
Kate,
Okay,
so do you need resumes from all of us? You need one from me too? I mean, you want a new one every year? Is that what you're looking for?
That's what CLG requires. So
Okay.
I'll check in with Judy to see whose resume are missing. From
You just got mine.
file.
Yeah, we already did mine, so just checking.
Okay. So Jim, I think you are the outstanding one. I feel like you did submit one when you came onto the board, but could you just
I did, but you want an updated one?
sure.
Okay, all right, I will send it to you.
Is there a form, Kate, that you need? Is it a business resume or discursive? Is that all right? It's like
It can be abbreviated, Tony. For you, it doesn't need to be your whole CV, just an abbreviated one. Or you can do the whole thing, doesn't matter.
I don't care.
It can be whatever you want. Just whatever you find in your file, send it off.
Good. Thank you for
Sure, it's
that.
included. All right, moving on to community or education community awareness. So maybe I should turn it over to Sue. Sue and I.
I want to make one comment when we start this. I did talk to the farmer's market, and there can be no, this year with COVID, unless you're selling food, you can't be at the market doing anything.
Okay.
So there's not going to be any entertainment. There's not going to be any children's tents, no community tents, nothing.
Yeah, we kind of assumed all of that.
Well, that came down from the agricultural department, so I just wanted to let you guys know.
Thank you. Sue and I discussed some stuff this afternoon. I will jump in with something before she starts. That she and I discussed that I wasn't going to bring up tonight, but as tonight, maybe my last meeting, who knows. As far as educational opportunities for training for this commission, I've been a proponent of training to get everyone up to speed on what the state expects us to do under our mandate. And the town HPC has footed the bill for themselves to have some training from Preservation Buffalo Niagara. And soon discussed, as we are both members of the town HPC, and we are going to jump on board as a Williamsville HPC to tag along for this free training. So I'm hoping all of you will take advantage of that. We're going to survey the town about what dates we can move forward with and set it up with the educator at Preservation Buffalo Niagara, and then we'll provide that date for you guys, and hopefully you can take advantage of that. The subject matter we're planning on is it's called Research to Landmark. So kind of jumping on board with what we've seen tonight with the self-designation or self-nomination for an application at 75 Evans Street. This is something that we can all be doing for structures, or a homeowner can be doing it for themselves. So I think this is gonna be a great opportunity. We'll let you know the date. It won't be for probably a couple weeks. And hopefully you guys can all join in. It's a great opportunity. It's going to be limited to board members because we're opening it up to the two, or limited to commission members because we're opening it up to the two commissions. There's no open meeting regulation because it's just training for commissions. So hopefully we'll be able to provide opportunities for the public in the future moving forward, but hopefully commission members will take this opportunity to learn more, even more about preservation. So
is this gonna be a Zoom meeting probably, Kate?
it will be a Zoom meeting, yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know where you went. In the last meeting, I went through and laid out some proposals and some ideas. And then the coronavirus came. So most of the things that we were talking about doing, I'm not sure we can do. So, and I think my recollection is the way that we left it was people were going to think about it and we were going to talk about it at a future meeting. So I don't know if you need me to refer. We were talking about the art festival potentially, right? Doing what we did last year, but I think that's up in the air at this point, right? We were talking, as Mary said, about the farmers markets. We were talking about possibly doing some educational events along the lines of what I did back in November. And we were talking about, training opportunities. So I think under the circumstances, that's kind of where we are.
Maybe we should put this on the agenda for the next meeting, and maybe we'll have clarity by then as to what the rules are, and that will impact our decision as to what we can do.
And Sue and I were talking about earlier, maybe we can, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say, when we met last, I told you that I was, the chair of the Amherst HPC, and I was going to be running similar list of ideas past them, which we did do. We did have a meeting in March, like 3 days before everything shut down, so we lucked out on that. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest in pursuing those things. Obviously, it's all really going to depend on what is happening and what we're allowed to do. But I will say that, the Amherst HPC, we are going to be funding some things in the future for trainings. And I do believe that we can still do those trainings. So to the extent that we here in the village can also kind of join together and offer, maybe co-sponsor some of those events. Those are things that I think we can still do regardless of the circumstances. So my focus there is going to be more on the educational piece in terms of training, and then also working on the website. And so that might be something else we might want to think about to maybe talk about next time. Is there anything that we want to do to the website to offer more education opportunities there, since we're sort of limited in what we can do in face-to-face opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, we could be asking the B to run some village history pieces. We could be asking the village to be putting this on their site, some village history pieces, just to keep promoting the message, as well as Sue's got the Williamsville Historical Society Facebook page. Possibly, maybe we can link up with the Amherst Museum or the Buffalo Niagara Heritage Village. Maybe they can take a little piece and focus on Williamsville and have a little blurb on their website. So maybe we can work on cross-promoting the Williamsville message on other platforms. It's a thought, but right now I think the digital world is our world that we're on, but many of us are on it all day. So, trying to keep ourselves informed, going to places we haven't gone before, and maybe we'll reach some more of our targeted audience. So maybe you could think about that and come back with maybe one item that you think that you could spearhead or join up with somebody else and try to promote that message as our educational piece when we're not allowed to be face to face with people. Just a suggestion.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll move on then. Residential design standards. So what I'd like to do is what we were planning on doing before March and March hit, well, middle of March hit. And it's to set up a separate meeting to talk specifically about the residential design standards. I'm assuming everybody has their copy, and we could continue to, we didn't get very far on these, but we can continue to go through and make our recommendations. Matt asked before he had to step away from this board. I'm not sure if everybody knows why Matt's not here tonight. Matt's recused himself. John has stepped in because of the Blocher Homes project that's going on in the village. So, so thank you again to John for being here this evening. So before he stepped away, you know, he asked if we wanted to hire from Natalia to do this. And I said, I think this is something that we can tackle, because I don't think we want a firm to come in and tell us what we need. I think here we have to be very specific about what this commission wants to have oversight on, and then very specific about what we do not want oversight on. So it's very clear to the applicants of a residential district what the rules are. And we don't want someone else being big brother thinking, oh, you want oversight on this and this and this and this, if that's not what this commission wants. If this commission wants only oversight on a few specific things, then we're just going to make it for a few specific things. So I think that our job is not a great of task, as a daunting of a task as, you know, maybe we've made it up in our minds. I think we need to reduce the design standards, the historic design standards, to possibly the bare minimum, so that we can, you know, make this palatable to the village. So I'd like to set up a separate Zoom for this. The village, I don't have an account that gives us more than 40 minutes, but maybe 40 minutes is all we do at a time. And we can, I guess maybe there has to be public meetings. So I guess the village would have to set them up. So I guess we can't do it on our normal night, because the village is very busy that night with their board meeting being switched to that date. But maybe we can do it in the next 2 weeks, like just pick an evening when everybody's free, and, you know, just kind of try to tackle some of this and get it done. Maybe you go through it and you know, tab the pages that you think are the most important, and we whittle this document down to a separate residential design standard of these are the most important things that we want to make sure are preserved in that neighborhood.
Kate, do you want to throw out a date now, or do you want to do like a doodle poll on it?
How about,
I've got my calendar right in front of me. That's what.
Does everyone have their calendars out? All the commission members?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. I'm looking at my
Yes.
calendar, and all the things that are on here for next week are not on here anymore. So, I mean, how does next? I have to okay this with Keaton to make sure there's no other village meetings. But what about the 21st, Thursday the 21st?
That's good for me.
It'd be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so I will ask Keaton if it's okay. He'll send out a Zoom meeting, and then hopefully publish it on the front page of the village website. So
7 p.m. Kate.
is that where people? I don't want to drag this out. I think we have to set a time limit, and whatever we get at that meeting, we get. So do you want to try an hour from 7 to 8, or do you want to do from like 6:30 to 7:30?
I pick 7 to 8.
7 to 8.
That sounds good to me.
7 to 8, May 21st.
21st.
Emily, you won't be a full-fledged member until the 26th, but if you'd like to join us, please do so. And Sue, as always, you're always invited to participate.
Yep,
And
yeah, I'm free.
everyone's invited.
Thanks.
As far as those.
Yep.
Kate, I assume you don't need me for that session, right? That's just gonna be a working.
No, this is just a work session.
Okay, this is Wes. Matt had put out a list back in November, an email.
Mhm.
He kind of went through the design standards and listed things he thought were important and probably not so important. That's a pretty good list to start from.
Okay.
Could maybe somebody recirculate that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's dated Monday, November 4th.
I think what we'll do is, so that everything's all compacted, is when Keaton sends out the new Zoom, we'll send out that email with it. So I'll try to send that to Keaton, and he'll either have it on the same page, or like he'll send one and then send the other one right away, so they're both together for you.
Yeah, and it looked like at the same time, Mary had responded on December 9th. And she went through part of the code, and so those two could probably be recirculated, might be.
You said
helpful.
December 9th?
December 9th.
Okay.
Yep. And that's it. It must have got reattached to Matt's at that time as well, so.
Okay. All right, I'll take a look at that. We'll recirculate that. Hopefully we'll have the Zoom invitation out in the next couple of days. And then all you have to do is write down it's like, I don't know, like a 10-digit number or something like that on your agenda, and then you can just put that right into Zoom. You don't need the link or anything, because if people are having trouble, finding the link.
Hey, this is Debbie speaking.
Yep.
Is that going to be a work session? And
It is.
Do you want me to be there?
It's a special work session. I think that we can probably handle it, because we're going to basically be redlining. So
Okay.
it has to give you like a red lines kind of,
Okay.
I think we'll kind of handle it the way Parks Commission handled redoing the Parks Plan, is we'll kind of work on it and then we'll present something to the village.
Okay.
Sound good?
Very good.
Okay.
Kate, Chuck
so
Akers, Chuck
Yes,
Akers
Chuck.
here. I have kind of a problem thinking about the design standard, and that is, what is the basis that we're looking at? What I mean by that is that if we are to look at streetscape view, and so it's design standard based upon what you see from the street versus all the other little things that are kind of in here. And then the question came up at our meeting about it. Well, what if it's on the corner and it's the side of the street? Well, that still is a streetscape. So if you can see that part of the building, then that part of the building, or that side of the building, is then covered under the design standard. I'm saying, bring this up because there's a lot of confusion about what does this really cover from the person looking at it and saying, how do I use this? And
Right.
I'd like some clarification on that before we get into this meeting on Thursday. So I know when we did the work down in Buffalo, if you can see it by the eye, it's covered. If you can't see it, then the design standards don't cover it. And if that's the philosophy of this thing, I think it makes things a lot easier going through it.
Well, I know how I feel about that. I mean, I don't want to speak for the other members, but I would be comfortable dealing with things that are visible from the street.
But then that pretty much leaves the front and both sides.
Front and the sides, kind of, yeah.
Right.
Where this becomes tricky, and we have to decide how we feel as a commission, is not many. There are features on these properties that are visible from the public park on the other side of the creek. So for instance, there is a tiny shed-like structure that is, along the creek, made out of stone, because the creek doesn't have any water in it right now, or it didn't a couple days ago. I took my kids on the village side and we walked the creek so they could see what it was. And it's highly visible even from the land. It even has a well next to it. And I don't know if the well is original to the house. Not enough research has been done to know. But this shed structure is very, very, very old. It's a masonry structure and it's gorgeous. So would something like that be included, or would the theory of this, if you can see it from the public right of way, would that be included in something that has oversight by an HPC?
Good point.
Well, we deemed that the little pagoda structure behind Jeff Vogel's office was part of the historic structure.
Right, but this is also residential, so we're making this distinction.
Right. But the castle, some of that isn't visible. I mean, the castle is not visible from the street, except during the winter.
So it is visible even during the winter. We don't exclude it, that from being visible.
What I would like to see, in my own personal opinion, is to take things, I mean, if you can't see things, and as long as nothing is built where it can be seen, because this also includes future modifications such as additions, then it wouldn't be under the preview of HPC. But if it is visible from any public right-of-way, then it should be considered to be part of the purview of the HPC.
Kate, I agree
would
with your thinking.
Kate's, view.
Say it again, Jim. I heard Chuck's comment.
I said I would agree with your view, Kate, on that.
I would agree.
I would agree. I would agree if you, where I said streetscape, make that, you know, a public right-of-way viewing point, which is just, you and I are agreeing on it.
I
What
agree
do
with
you
you.
say?
I agree with you too, but you want to put it, you almost need to put a season on it. Is this a streetscape in December or is this a streetscape in July?
I don't think it makes a difference.
Okay.
I mean, everyone has in the public right of way, many times the municipality in the front of someone's house plants trees. So if you're in the street, you may not be able to see it, but if you're on the sidewalk, you may. So you have a big gorgeous tree in the middle of their yard. But I think the way we need to look at it is landscaping is landscaping. An ash tree could die, you know, if it hasn't already, and it could be gone tomorrow. So I think we need to look at these things, you know, minus the landscaping, which I think the attitude of this board is we aren't going to talk about landscaping because these are residential structures.
I agree with you. My point was more, you can see a lot more in the winter than you can in the summer if you're just doing the streetscape.
And that's why a historic preservation surveyor's favorite time to do anything is after the leaves have fallen.
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, I think we can make that. I think maybe that's a note that we can make clear to an applicant. I think we're all on the same page,
I think we are.
so that there's no misconceptions about what the rules are.
Just so I just want to raise something, because again, this is really a drafting issue for you all, but I want to make sure we create a document that is clear. You know, right now, and as proposed, somebody needs a certificate of appropriateness for this board if it's a individual landmark or a property in a district, which the village doesn't have any districts at present, to carry out any exterior alteration, restoration, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't say anything about where it's visible from or not visible from. Are you suggesting that you want the trigger for certificate of appropriateness to be tied to visibility, or just the applicability of standards, or are we talking different with respect to commercial properties versus residential properties? So
There is a difference between, there would be a difference if a residential design standard were adopted by the village, between residential design standards and then the other design standards. So okay. Commercial, because civic is included and things like that, religious is included and things like that. So a residential versus the other design, historic design standards.
So what you foresee is, yeah, that although you may need a certificate of appropriateness for a residential individual landmark, the design standards, unlike maybe a building on Main Street and those standards, these residential design standards are really just going to be focused on what's visible from the street or from the public realm.
This is Chuck Higgins. We've always did this with the schoolhouse down here on South Georgia, because when that came up, we told the owner, well, you do anything you want in the back because we can't see it from the street.
That's right.
Right, which was probably a mistake because you can see the back of the house from the
Right. So Kate, this is Sue. So that is a change. in essence. I mean,
It's a
in
change
essence-
in philosophy. It had
Right.
nothing to do with what was on paper.
Right.
Is there another community that has faced this, that we can look at their design standards?
I'm not familiar with a lot of other municipalities' historic design standards.
There's a lot on the internet. I came across about 25 of them.
Yeah, I've collected some of them over the years too. I don't know how many of them are, focused more on residential or commercial, but I'll take a look through too, and I can forward some to you all.
Yeah, I mean, is it Penfield or the one outside of Rochester
Pittsford.
and Pittsford, and then Canandaigua, the whole village is a historic preservation district. I mean, I wonder if there's a variance between residential and commercial.
We also talked about this when we talked about this before. I think Ithaca was another one that we looked at.
Yeah, I just don't want to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah, just keep in mind that there's many CLGs in other communities with historic districts that don't have design standards. I mean, the design standards are relatively new and a minority of, I think there more and more communities are adopting them, but there are many communities that simply have what we have before we had any design standards, which is just the bare bones.
My aunts used to live in Pittsford, and I would drive through the village of Pittsford a lot. And boy, it seems like they must have restrictions because a lot of those residences are very, very controlled as to what they can do.
No, they do, but that doesn't mean they have, and I'm not saying they don't, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily have design standards. You can have, you can regulate something just like this commission did before it had design standards. The whole idea of developing design standards was to try to create, I think, a little bit more consistency and predictability in the process.
And my sense is Pittsford has really, they have some controls in place there.
They do. It's a former coworker of my husband who's the municipal leader there, Bob Corby, and he has an eye for all of this, and he's a planner, I think, and he puts everything down on paper of what people can do and can't do, and he runs a tight ship there. So yeah, you can look and see there's design standards, there's residential design standards. They've got everything in Pittsburgh. So maybe what homework could be for this meeting on the 21st is if you find a page from the residential design standards that somebody else has, just bring it to the meeting, and hopefully we'll have the capability of sharing the screen with everybody. If you just highlight, what you found, or just take a picture of it with your phone and send a picture of it in the email beforehand, or something like that. I don't want to belabor, going through this. We're only going to do an hour, but if you have something you really like, just grab the language, and we'll see if we can make it fit. Okay.
Sounds good.
Model law update. I have an email from Matt. I have many emails from Matt today, so let me just try to find it.
I can probably update you on that too. It's not going to be a lengthy.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know what Matt said in his email, but the village board did discuss it last night. They've been struggling obviously in moving forward too, and there's a backlog of public hearings essentially. So they have not rescheduled yet or scheduled the public hearing on the new updated Chapter 47 for the HPC. And one of the goals in trying to decide when they're going to try to move forward with that is to get feedback from this board as to how pressing they feel that is or isn't. I suppose, the board made a nomination today under the existing code, seemed adequate for that purposes, but we know that this code does have some gaps in it that we're trying to fill by the new law. So I think that's what the Board of Trustees, and John can probably chime in, if he thinks differently, but I think that one of the things they were looking for was to get some feedback from this board as to how impatient or patient you may be with respect to moving forward with that. Just given, the number of public hearings and the difficulty of conducting public hearings in this manner. The only other thing I'll say is I don't think really the trustees have really had a chance to dive into it. It's a pretty beefy chapter, much beefier than the existing chapter. But there was a discussion, just because, as some of you know who also serve on other boards, there's some discussion about the term issues on some of the other boards, and the fact that there's no consistency between the term length of the planning board, the zoning board, and this board. You all serve for 4-year terms, and it's structured very differently than the CBA, which is structured very differently from the planning board. And there was, I think the village board was at least contemplating whether it makes sense to try to make all those more or less the same, so that there's some consistency and predictability between the boards as to how long the terms are going to be. So I only mention that because it's possible that they may want to make changes to what's suggested in the model law right now, depending on what they decide to do with respect to terms for the other boards.
My understanding from watching or from listening to that was that they wanted to find out what the dates were of the terms that we already have existing on the HPC.
Yeah, and we didn't know that. Right, we didn't know that nobody knew that last night.
Right, and that they were looking at reducing the number of people on the planning board from 7 to 5, which would thereby reduce the terms to 5 years, which is now 7.
No, that's not quite. First of all, the board, at least by straw poll last night, decided that the majority of the board does not want to downsize the planning board.
Okay, it wasn't what I took from that.
But they do want to continue their practice of using 3-year terms for the planning board, at least for now. But again, the ZBA has 5-year terms and you guys have 4-year terms. So there's just some concern. I was like, wait a minute, why do we have all these different lengths for these different boards? Which is a fair question. So that's, again, I don't know what Matt may have put in your email, but that was my recollection of what the discussion was with respect to what they want to do, or what they're, I mean, to be honest with you, this just hasn't been on the front burner for them yet. So there was a sense, I mean, and when I say this, I mean moving this model law. But what I think that they're hoping to get from you guys is some sort of feedback as to how you guys, I mean, you guys have a lot on your plate right now too. How anxious or not anxious are you to try to get the village board to either adopt or do whatever they're going to do with respect?
Well, as it's been 5 years, I believe, I think we're pretty anxious. It's been 5 years. So I mean, Matt told me that it was not on the agenda for this last board meeting. Asked if, or he said he expected it to be on the next agenda. So we're hoping that is the case for a public hearing. He felt confident that he could explain the changes to the board, and was very hopeful that, the board would be accepting of the new chapter 47 after he explained the modifications and where they came from. As far as the downsizing, he did mention that as well. And my response, so that the commission knows what my response was because he said that the reason the board was looking to reduce the number of spots on the commission was because the board was worried about lack of quorum and saddling future boards with the issue of lack of quorum. My response was, our HPC has not in years, since we increased, and I guess I didn't say this, since we increased the number of members, we have not had a problem with quorum. this commission is very dedicated. We did our CLG report, and I do not think we've had to cancel one meeting or not been able to fully make a decision at a meeting for lack of quorum. So
Hey, when did the commission enlarge? I don't see any indication in the code that the number has ever been changed.
I think we've always been 7.
we've
I
been,
think we have.
I think we've always been 7.
Yeah.
What was amended back in 2013 is you had the requirement that, or at least the preference that there be a cross appointment between the planning board and that's the only amendment that's noted in the section that creates the section 47.3, which talks about the commission. So I think you've always been 7.
well,
Yeah,
I
I
know
think
for
we
many
have too.
years we did have a problem getting a quorum to the board. But since, I think that probably changed over, like 5-6 years ago-ish, that we have not had problems getting quorums to these.
Yeah, we've been a lot more active. Mhm.
Oh, that's true. I guess when we were meeting 4 times a year, maybe that's what we increased. We used to only meet 4 times a year, and getting a quorum was very difficult. Then we increased it a little bit more, and then we took the final step, I believe, to meet monthly.
Okay, well,
Since we've been meeting monthly, we have not had issues.
yeah, I think we were always supposed to meet monthly, but we had to meet at least 4 times a year. And when there wasn't much going on, we just.
Which is, yeah, and that's a CLG requirement. I mean, that's not actually in our code, but it is a CLG requirement.
Okay.
You have to meet at least 4 times a year or you risk losing your CLG status.
Okay.
Which
So
obviously has not been a problem for this board, at least in the recent.
Okay. I also talked to Matt today and expressed my opinion about that we should remain a 7-member board as well. That I think kind of the more the merrier on this board is a good thing. Different opinions, different ideas, and it's a good mix to have.
And by the way, I may be wrong. I know that issue was certainly discussed before, but actually I don't think that anybody mentioned that specific issue last night, although it's possible. I may have stepped out for a second. But, I mean, I'm talking about the downsizing of this board.
No, I didn't hear any discussion of that.
Because Matt was talking about, he said, I thought there was a discussion about that. Maybe John can fill us in, but he was specifically talking about reducing the size of this board in the email he sent to me.
That discussion has been discussed, not in any great depth previously, but I don't think it was discussed last night, unless it was, and if it did, I missed it completely.
The concern raised last night was about getting an archaeologist, and then it was noted that the fact that if we couldn't get an archaeologist, because everyone has to be a village resident, that if it was someone who was interested in history and had a background, they would be acceptable in lieu of that space.
Right. If we can't fill a specific job title, we'll call it, then you can, and then that just is in the code, but we just fill it with the next eligible person meeting the criteria.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah. So that's it. That's in the existing law, and it's in the draft new law too. I mean, the village board can appoint. It's aspirational. They should try their best to get those qualifications, but they can't. They can't. But so I guess to not belabor this discussion any longer. I mean, so if that's the plan from the village board to have that public hearing, then it's really incumbent upon the village board to review that. And if they are, maybe they're just going to notice it as drafted, as recommended by you guys, or if they want to make any possible tweaks to it, then it's going to be incumbent upon them to let me know that before that public hearing. But otherwise, I guess what's going to happen, we'll have the public hearing, and certainly, you all or some of you may want to be heard on that at that public hearing. But we'll have to wait and see.
Would anyone like to make a motion tonight to recommend that the HPC go to 5 members or stay at 7 members? And then we've talked about and alternates. Does anyone feel strongly that they would like to put that out there in writing for the village board to have?
Doesn't our model law say 7 members?
It does.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, then I don't think that we need to make another resolution on top of what we've already given them. Do you? I think what we should recommend is that they go ahead and proceed because we're comfortable with what we've submitted.
Okay.
Let me raise one, and I think that's absolutely fine. I will raise, but on this term issue then, because frankly, I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that till this term issue came up with the other boards. But, so right now, there is actually an inconsistency, which is okay, but we should make sure it's intentional, and that's what we want. Right now, under the existing law, you all serve 4-year terms that are basically staggered 4 years terms with every other year, basically 4 of you. There's 4, because of the way the initial appointments went, 4 people expire at the same time, and then 2 years later, 3 people expire. So every other year, there's either 4 or 3 coming off. So that's been the current. That's what the current law provides. The proposed, and I don't think we made any changes from this. This was based straight on SHPO's model, but actually maybe we don't want this if we're comfortable with what the village, how it's been done. Let me just quickly pull that up.
While he's looking, just for everyone's knowledge, I think the only way you get on and off this board up until now has been of your own volition. Otherwise, you just kind of get re-signed up.
I mean, I guess maybe I'm missing something. I don't know why we have to change anything. I think Mary makes a good point that it's already, if it's already in the law, what's the point of making a resolution?
No, Jim, that's a fair point. But this is the point I'm trying to bring up is there actually now, if the draft law were to be adopted as drafted,
yeah,
it handles terms differently than the current law does in the way you have all been appointed. So my question is whether, so let me just tell you how the terms, again, this wasn't something I don't think we touched. So in other words, this was in the SHPO model. And it says, if I can find it. So it still says, it says 4 years, but the term shall be staggered and fixed so that the term of one member shall expire at the end of the village official year in which such commission members were initially appointed. The terms of the remaining members shall be so fixed that the term shall expire at the end of each village official year thereafter. So in other words, it's not that big of a difference, I guess, but because it's still 4-year terms, but here you'd have one person having their 4-year term expire every year. Whereas under the current law, as I said, 4 people expire on 1 year, and then 2 years later, 3 people expire. And then
that's reckless, I think. That 4 and 3 is, you don't have an opportunity to have a flow of leadership and engagement. You don't have the opportunity. You have 4 people learning the language together with 3 elders.
No, that's an excellent observation, Tony. Although subject are tempered perhaps somewhat by what Kate's historical experience is that people generally get reappointed. So you haven't had that sort of mass turnover.
Right.
But I agree with you. Structurally, it is a little. So maybe we do want to do what the draft law, that we like it better. We just got to figure out how it's going to transition then, because you all have terms right now. So we need to make sure that works. I'm going to have to give that a little bit of thought.
If there is another consideration is with someone who terms off in 4 years, might that person be reappointed should the person desire in following a year hiatus or
well, there's no term limits. There's no limits. You can be reappointed indefinitely.
How many years, Wes?
Oh, I see. I got it. What? Pardon me? Like what?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
30 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just to be, yeah, just so everyone's clear,
Yeah,
there's
you're asking.
no term limits. It's just
Gotcha.
a question of how
What
long
is the term?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, thank you.
I think we should leave it the way it's in the new proposed law, one per year goes off. So you have complete continuity going through the whole thing and you don't lose corporate memory.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, but it does mean I'm going to have to give it a little bit of thought as to how we transition from what we're doing now to that. Because the problem is, usually you would have that kick in when when the prior terms expire, but it wouldn't work in this case because you're going to have 4 people coming off, and then the only way they'll have to be appointed to different length terms to get to that once every other year. But don't worry about it. I'll give that a little bit of thought, and we'll have to add some transitional language in there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think everyone's in agreement that the way CLG has handled it thus far, or the way that the new model, Chapter 47 has been drafted is the way we want it. So we're going to not be reckless moving forward.
Right.
Okay. And then finally, then our last agenda item for this evening, so I got a little guy who wants to go to bed here, was an update from Matt as per the HPC budget from the fiscal year that 20, are they starting, let's see, 2020/2021. And I'll kind of abbreviate this. So he attached the budget summary, and they took down $1,000 from Sue's printing costs because the village hall has the ability to do high gloss printing, so that they don't need to outsource that. So, and moreover, the printing costs are borne elsewhere in the budget and won't be applied to your line anyway. So basically, we got the financing that we asked for. So, and it's in another email, as we can imagine, because they're going to have to start tightening because of sales tax revenue loss. I think it'll be really important that we be as fiscally responsible as we can moving forward, with our budget and see if we can help the village in any way because of these unforeseen circumstances, or, and what's important to us that we want to move forward with. And I think we're in a good place.
And
I'll donate my salary back to the village, so.
What's that, Wes?
I'll donate my salary back to the village.
Yeah, me too.
So I will just, again, just sort of echo that, because all municipalities in New York State and everybody's, we all need to realize that there may have to be, the budgets were adopted based on what information was available in March. If the federal government does not help come to the rescue of state governments, it is possible that the state may be making some cuts that could come down to this level. So could affect everybody.
The village budget was adopted April 1st. Is that the idea?
It was adopted May 1st. It was adopted April. It was adopted by May 1st. The fiscal year starts June 1.
All right, so their fiscal year starts June 1. So the new budget's in place at this point?
No, not till June 1.
Not till June.
I mean, it was adopted, but you're not in your next fiscal year.
Right, I got you.
Did the village adjust their expected budget after Corona hit? Or they just went with what they had and they said, we'll just kind of adjust as it go along?
That's a good point, Kate. I was wondering that.
It's John maybe is a better person to answer that question than me, but I think essentially, because I'm not really directly involved in the budget discussions at all. But I think that they're, adopted the budget based on the information they had, with the realization that it may be necessary to make some cuts mid-year.
Yeah.
Well, or what about the village reserve?
Again, John's in a better position to answer those questions than I am.
What was your question, Kate?
Or what about, is the village planning on dipping into the reserve, or?
I don't know if there's any plan of that right now. I know what Chip was just saying, kind of, we passed it as we had, as of middle of February, we last discussed it. And, I guess as things go along, we'll see what revenue is there, what's not, that cuts will be made. So But nothing is definitely known yet.
Right. The one specific thing they did talk about last night was we're not opening Garrison Pool, and that'll save $22,000 this year.
And the only, I'll just mention this because I don't think a decision has been made on this, but I'm just going to mention it because actually your feedback may be useful on this. You know, historically, the village attorney has not or did not attend all HPC meetings. Once you guys started getting a lot more active and we had a lot of things on our plate, we started to do that. But it may be worth, I think the village board is also interested.
Yep, we already kicked you out. You're only here because the village wanted you here tonight.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna say, I mean, I don't think you really need me unless maybe you've got nominations or doing something with the law, but like the certificates of.
Right.
No, we already discussed this. So when we found out that you weren't part of the term contract with HPC, we said, well, we don't need Chip at every meeting, and we'll know when we do. So we tonight the village asked you to be here because they felt, I guess, it was important for you to be here during the nomination process or whatever else they saw on the agenda they wanted you here for. So I think in most cases we're going to leave it up to the village to decide when you have to attend our meetings.
Okay.
For money. So unless we're in dire straits, then we're gonna defer to. So okay. All right. Well, that wraps up our meeting then.
Kate,
yes,
Kate, how about Mill Street Stone Wall?
Oh, thank you. So has everybody driven past 95 or 87 Mill Street any time recently?
Oh, yeah, I do about every few days.
Today.
Let me pull up and show the screen if I can. An email that I sent, it's probably in my sent mail, to the village code enforcement officer regarding this property, because my son and I drove by and my son jumped out of his seat in the car. He was like, oh my gosh, they knocked down more of the wall. And I'm like, what? The inspector said they didn't. And he's like, oh yes, there's parts missing.
Oh yeah.
So we got out, here it is, and we took pictures.
Let me know when you want to share it. I'll stop sharing so you can share, Kate.
It's actually on my phone, so I'm gonna have to hold it. I apologize. So here's a picture. There's apparently
you sent the picture out, I think, and so I did see those.
You know what? But,
oh, you know what? I can bring it up on my email. What am I thinking? Let me just bring it up on my email.
Okay. Yeah, you could also exit the mode, you know, where you could go to speaker mode, in which case all we'd see is Kate while she's talking.
Oh, you know,
your phone would be bigger.
Let me just
yeah, but your phone would be bigger.
Oh, all right. Let me just. I can bring it up here. If I can bring this up really quick. I'm sorry. Bear with me, everybody. Sometimes the email gets the best of me because I.
Wait, you copied me on that email, right?
Did I? I think I did.
So hang on. I probably can pull them up too.
Oh, here.
You sent it to Tim.
I sent it to Tim. Oh my gosh, I'm going through my sent emails. Hold on. Stonewall. Okay. And of course, the pictures don't want to load. Let's see if I can forward it. Okay.
Here, if I can pull it up. I can pull them up if you want me to share.
I'm sure if Chip wants to share. So there is a pink mark that they are going by of where the wall ended. And so this is what the wall looked like. I forget the date, but it was when the village stopped the destruction of the wall initially. And you can see that there are some concrete slabs under a portion of the wall here. From basically in this angle, it's where the green house ends, in the middle, kind of towards to the left-hand side. It looks, I think it's like a 10-foot section. Now, if she goes to the other picture, you will see none of the concrete slab portion is there at all now. They've removed it all, and it's actually this wall as of days ago. When Mary alerted me that they were taking down more of the wall, I immediately called the village and asked them to send Tim or the police to have them stop. And Judy contacted Tim. Tim went over there. He wrote me an email back stating, you know, the wall's in the same condition as it was when we asked them to stop. There's a pink marker there, and it's still there. So this right here is the pink mark, if you can see that, and it is at the end of the wall past the slabs. So this is what's still there. So I'm confused how this pink mark, well, I told the building inspector I'm confused. Was the pink mark put at that part of the wall when the destruction of this wall was ended, or is this a new pink mark? Or like, how did the pink mark get there? Because we can see from photographic evidence, there's like 10 more feet of this wall that's missing. Is it going to be 10 more feet tomorrow and 10 more feet in the next day? So Inspector Masters has not gotten back to me on this matter. I assume he's overloaded with other work and, you know, trying to telecommute himself sometimes. So we're waiting for a response, but I mean, I'm wondering legally, since we have legal representation here, we nominated this wall at our last meeting in March. There should have been nothing taking place with this, the demolition of this, without a C of A. And now can the commission ask for the legal system to get involved?
So, yeah, so let's see here. So, well, I'm gonna have to refresh my, this got a little bit confusing because there was a whole issue about whether or not they actually needed a demolition permit. Oh no, but this was, I'm sorry, has the wall actually been? No, the wall has not yet been landmarked, right? This is a question of the moratorium.
We have sent the nomination to the village board for public hearing.
Yeah.
Everything
So
is
it's the
HBC,
question.
and the moratorium has started.
It's the question, right? But the moratorium is on the issuance of building permits, and then we discovered there's really a discrepancy in the code on how it treats whether or not a permit, you need a building permit, which would include a demolition permit as a species of building permit for a wall. And I'm sorry, I have not, I'd have to go back to look at the back and forth that we had looking at the code issue. I'm not prepared to answer that question right now, but I can look at that and talk to Tim about that. I mean, I agree with you, right? Where did the pictures go? That it does, I mean, if you look at these pin flags, right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in this picture with the fourth one with no wall. Assuming these pin flags haven't moved, there's 1, 2, 3 here.
Oh, well, the pin flags move. Just look at the makeup of this wall.
Well, no, I clearly, right. Clearly these things are gone. These things are gone. No question. So
in relation to that tree too, the tree that's there.
And so what the easy question to answer, but unfortunately we're not dealing with easy facts here, is if this was a landmark, had been after the hearing and not actually designated by the village board, then clearly you couldn't do this without approval. But what is a harder question is whether or not the moratorium prevents that work if in fact it only does if they needed a permit for it. And that was not a clear, there wasn't a clear answer to that question. There's some real ambiguity in the code. So, but Kate, I'm gonna have to revisit that.
Public hearing for this this property in particular, the owner, who is a preservation, she is an attorney who specializes in historic tax credits and preservation, according to her LinkedIn site.
I'm sure, I went to law school with her. I know her well.
I don't know her at all, and although she said she wants to be able to take it down at any time, she also said that she was going to work with the building department to make sure there was no misunderstandings moving forward. And so I'm confused that the owner is not respecting what they said at the public hearing and has just demolished another section of the wall. So I'm hoping that the ambiguity, is resolved in our new chapter 47, but under the old code, I think the HPC needs to recommend that the village attorney, the code enforcement officer, and the village board, figure out the solution for this. My recommendation is that if it is against the law what this homeowner has done, that they be brought to court for it.
Chuck, can I ask a question? You educate me about this.
Yep.
So say this wall was designated, and they go ahead and tear down part of it. Can the village get them to rebuild it and say you got to put it?
If again, though, if this was actually designated, then as I said, the answer is a lot easier and clearer. But yes, if somebody demolishes a
The
landmark,
court system can make you do that, but the village cannot.
Well, I'm just
right.
saying the potential is there that they would have to rebuild the thing.
potentially, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So, again, I'll go back and look at this, but as I recall, I actually made a proposed tweak to the law to try to address that issue. I don't know it's going to be up to the village board ultimately if they want to include that language or not in what they adopt.
Well, and I think this is another reason that this village board wants to press for those public hearings that are in front of the village board to act on, that they act on them in a timely manner, because things go on while the law sits. We've been waiting 5 years for this. A lot has happened in the village in 5 years, and we are anxious to get it done so that we stop the ambiguity.
Yeah, and clearly, as Matt indicated, contrary to what I was suggesting, that they weren't necessarily going to move ahead with it right away, but according to Matt, it's going to be on the agenda for the next meeting, so there'll be a hearing on it.
I would second Kate's suggestion. I think that based on the hearings we had, these are very not controversial. I mean, getting these stone walls to be designated, I think it's not going to create a lot of heat for the village board. So I would say, see if we can get going on them.
You'd be surprised what's controversial.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
I
things.
stand corrected.
One of the things that I want to kind of add to that little bit is the village board is concerned about votes. And like on Reese Street, the McHugh, who owns 71, I think it's 91 or 71 Reese, says he's against this 100%. So is the board going to go against what the homeowner wants? And the homeowner is against this wall that's partially torn down now. I think it's horrible that it was done. But what is the recourse now with underneath the old law? Because the new law is going to be passed for 6 months. So what can you go to court for? What law did they break under the old law that we have?
If they required a permit for what they did, and they did it without a permit, they can be cited for that. But as I said, I'm going to have to go back and look at that and discuss that with Tim. First of all, I can only give an opinion on this. I am not the village prosecutor, and I'm not the code enforcement officer. So.
Sorry to interrupt, but speaking of which, I texted Tim if he was available to kind of come in, maybe kind of help the conversation along. So he just arrived now, so he might be.
Yay! Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Tim.
Hello.
So we're talking about the 87 Mill Street wall.
Okay.
So we were looking at pictures, the same ones I sent you. Chip brought them up on the screen. Have you
Hang
had,
on, let me bring them up again. Right? What did I do with them? Where did I?
Check the garbage can.
No, seriously, what did I?
No, we don't want it that up there.
No.
Nope.
Was it in your Google email, or the Chrome?
There it is. You got this now, right?
Yes.
So Tim, do you have any updates?
Not since the email I sent you. Basically, the what's there today is staying, and they're going to incorporate it into the landscape.
So what happened to like the last 10 feet that was demolished again?
So that portion with the funky foundation under it was falling out, and they also had to take the gas line in right in that portion where that other yellow flag is right in front of there. So, you know, that was damaged. There was a tree that was right under this section, and that was the part that was kind of failing. So he had to run a French drain system in the gas line that was going to go in there. So that little section with the bad foundation came out. They kept the old original wall on the right side.
Well, that's the original wall on top of that funky foundation.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, but it was damaged from the original demo and from that tree that came down, and they needed to take the gas line through right there. So, you know, it was kind of incidental with that.
Well, and so was it your determination that they didn't need to come to HPC for that a certificate, or just actually they just weren't allowed to do it until the village board finished their process for public hearing and vote on the property as it was already locally landmark nominated?
No. Well, he told me where he was taking.
I don't mean that sound snippy, Tim.
No, I get it. Originally, when this whole thing first came up, when I talked to Bergman, once it had already started being demolished, he had told me where he wanted to take it down to. When I sent out that whole group of emails to all of you the first time, that was the intention, to take it down to that picture right there, and incorporate that into the landscaping. That's what he agreed to. Just because you see where those flags go up, that's where the gas line had to come through from the gas company. So it would have been in the way, like tunneling under it would have made it fall down anyways. And that's what he had explained to me after they started the first portion of the demo. So he painted that pink line on it that I sent you, and said that's where they would stop and keep it from there, and then kind of go from there. So I had okayed that.
Gas line at the front of the house like that. Why isn't it running on the side of the house?
They can't. If they run on the other side, the driveway's in the way, and if they run it on the north side, the edge of this wall is in the way, and they'd be on the neighbor's property. So in order to run it on their property, they had to pick somewhere in the middle here.
And they couldn't have picked, 5 feet to the north because that part of the wall had already come down?
Well, that I don't know. That's National Fuel, not necessarily the builder. I didn't get involved in those conversations per se.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing was kind of a snafu from the beginning because they did have a valid building permit before, and it was not nominated until after they started the work. So technicality, they could have taken the whole wall down in my interpretation of the code without having any retribution at all. I think that they made a compromise, you know, and kept the portion of the wall that's there. And that's my view of it, because they had a valid building permit before that can't just be stopped. At least this is how I interpret the code. Maybe Chip can correct me.
Well, no, I'm not, it's not my job to correct you, but as I recall, and again, I have to get back in to, and what I mean by that is I can give you my opinion, but you're code enforcement officer who interprets the code. But I think the issue, apart from whether or not they had a building permit, I think the separate issue is whether the village does require, has required, has ever, takes the position that you need a permit, a building permit, to knock down a wall. And but putting aside whether or not it's a historic landmark,
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was my understanding that we did not. I know the new demo code kind of addresses that, but that was not in place before this permit was issued.
Right.
So that was the problem we had at the time. They submitted a site plan when they submitted the building plans, and you know, he asked about the wall. It was not historic at the time, and what his plans were, and that all got approved when the permit got issued.
When did the demo code get approved?
That I don't know.
It was before this wall was taken down, I think. Excuse me, the last about 10 feet of it, because that just happened this week, I believe.
Yeah, but my view on that was, you know, they already had approval to do all that anyways.
Well, they had a building permit for something for the property, but you didn't need it. I mean, my argument has always been, I'm not a enforcement officer, that if they didn't need a building permit for something, then it was fair game if the demo code changed it, and then the HPC landmark or put in a nomination stopping demolition. And that was my reasoning for saying, how did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a normal situation, this wouldn't happen because it would have been on a list. And now with the new demo code, you know, they've defined structure a little differently.
Well, not really. We've talked about making additional changes because of this, but really, so the demo
did that last
code,
change not go in?
The demo code was adopted November 25th of
I thought we
2019.
changed the verbiage on the structure portion.
No,
maybe
so
that part didn't go in yet.
structure is still sort of ambiguously defined, a combination of materials other than a building to form a construction that is safe and stable and includes, among other things, gazebos, trellises, decks, platforms, radio towers, sheds, and storage bins. The purpose of this chapter, a fence is not a structure.
Yeah,
so where does a wall fall into that?
Yeah, so then going off of that, I wouldn't have made them get a demo permit for that wall still.
That's
honestly.
a retaining wall.
Well, it is on the other side, but it's not on this side.
That's what a retaining wall is.
Well, yeah, it all depends on your definition of retaining wall, I guess.
But still, the code, I don't think answers the question as to whether a retaining wall is a structure.
Correct. And that was the same problem I ran into before. You know, and honestly, I just approved a site plan. I wasn't necessarily just saying, hey, take the wall down.
Right, because the wall was not part of the permit initially.
Well, yes and no, because when they submit a permit, they're submitting with a site plan that gets approved. I have to approve the grading, the drainage, everything. So it's not like the site plan is a separate issue that just happens to be accomplished at some point. That's all part of the building permit that's submitted. So that I differ with you on that opinion, just saying that, you know, the site plan is approved with the permit. While you don't need a permit for it, you know, I need to make sure that whole thing's functioning properly. Originally, they were going to take the wall down and run their drainage up to the street and tie into the storm sewers, which now they've changed that whole plan and come up with a French drain system because the wall is staying, which they've all accommodated for with what's there.
When did they change the plan? Did they change the plan because the wall came down?
No, they changed the plan because the wall's in their way still. They wanted to run the gutter systems out on the south side of the lot along that neighbor's property, right, and tie into the storm sewer system. But they can't do that now because the wall is in the way, the portion that they're keeping. So now they changed and put in a French drain system with a pit, you know, to try and keep it away from the wall, and they can't tie into the storm sewer system. So, you know, their view is they're accommodating and keeping the wall and incorporating it into landscaping, you know, and accomplishing their site plan another way. But they'd prefer not to do that. They would have just wanted to take the whole wall down.
I just want to let us know so we're crystal clear. If they come to you tomorrow and say, we want to remove the rest of the wall, where are you with your judgment as far as allowing or disallowing that per the code?
I'm not sure on that question. I mean, in talking to him, he's going to keep the rest of the wall, so it's not going to become an issue. That's already a dead issue. However, you know, I'd have to evaluate it because in reading the historic code, it doesn't say that once a nomination comes in that it would necessarily stop a valid building permit. And I viewed a site plan as part of that valid building permit. So it would get a little iffy. I couldn't give you a good answer on that. But that being said, no more of the walls coming down anyway, so it's not going to become an issue. You know, it puts me in a sticky spot when these things aren't on the list. If they're not on the list at the time of a building permit, and I issue the permit, it's kind of game over at that point, which is tough, you know. So I don't know how to take that going forward.
So Chip, let's say there's building permits, or demolition permits. Let's use South Cayuga. South Cayuga is listed in the 1997 recon, and I believe that the new demolition code calls for properties listed in the 1997 recon to trigger, it's either notification to the HPC or something.
Yeah, so that's actually in the demo code.
So if a building permit was already given,
right here,
and the new demolition code was adopted, how does timing affect all of this?
I don't, how does, if this was in effect at the time, but it doesn't answer the question of whether it still only relates to an application for a demolition permit. The question is still, do you need a demolition permit to demolish a wall? That is at best an arguable point under the way the code is written. Again, let's not confuse the prohibition on demolishing a landmark with the moratorium on building permits, which can include demolition permits, or something that has been nominated for a landmark. This
Kate,
is what this.
Kate, it seems pretty clear the rest of the wall's not going down. You know, I'm not a building person, but it seems like just looking at it, part of that must have been unstable. I mean, it might have been that they couldn't stabilize that part that they took down. But if we're pretty sure that they pledged,
they weren't stabilizing the land on the east side of it. They have not been contractors with that wall.
I mean, if they're going to not take
I'm
down,
a construction person.
I'm not a construction. If they're not going to take down the rest, I guess that's better than losing it all.
We'll see.
I don't agree with that.
I just don't know how you go backwards. And honestly, I think they would have won the fight on the timing issue is the problem.
Well,
Again, I don't see a timing issue. The question is, I don't know that there's really any difference. We'd have to go back to see what the old code looked like, I guess, to see whether there was a difference. It's still not clear that you need a building permit, a demolition permit, to knock down a non-landmarked wall.
Because honestly, I would never issue a demo permit for a non-landmarked wall. And in both municipalities, Pendleton and here, you know, I've never done that. So past practice, it's just not something that's done unless it's in the code.
And that's not right. And that's not to say the code couldn't provide that.
Correct, yes.
But the question is whether the code does provide that.
And I mean, the stuff on Cayuga is a different topic just because that's already been nominated. So anything on that list now falls under the historic code, you know, for a moratorium. Different than what this was.
Say it again?
You know, the stuff on Cayuga Street that's all been nominated?
It hasn't been nominated.
You guys haven't filled out the nomination forms? It hasn't officially been nominated?
It has not been nominated.
Has not been nominated.
Okay. I thought it was.
But the wall has been.
The wall has been. That's why we're confused.
Well, I get that, but at the same time, that was already done with before. I guess my issue is with the timing. Does that mean that if I issued a valid building permit and then it gets nominated in the middle, that it has to be adjusted? That's my question. especially for something that wouldn't have required a demolition permit in the first place.
Well, the homeowner knew exactly what we were talking about because she was at the nomination meeting.
Correct, but there was also a discrepancy. I know this was discussed before, but 95 Mill Street was actually the one nominated at the time.
No,
It
but
was
we
not-
stated during our meeting that we knew that the parcel had another building going up, and we stated specifically that we asked the village administrator to make sure the SBL was correct because because the Erie County GIS did not list the new SBL. So we were very clear during that meeting what our intentions were. So
Yeah.
I don't think that argument held water at all. She knew exactly what was going on.
Well, nonetheless, I don't know where we go from here other than, you know, my position on it at the time was they were going to try and save the wall. If they couldn't, they were going to take down whatever they needed to or take down the whole wall. And then this whole thing happened. And then they agreed to keep the portion that they're going. And that's really as good as I could have got it at the time. And even having them restore it, I don't even know what we would have done at the time because they buried all the rocks.
They're still up there now. They're behind the wall. All the
Well,
is already
that's some of the rock, and some of that's from when they dug the French drain system. That's some of the stuff that they blasted out when they did the foundation. So it's not all the wall.
Well, we'll I guess agree to disagree, and
Yeah, and again, that was my position at the time. I still would hold to that position just based on timing alone. But, you know, that being said, as we evaluate going forward, I would definitely look at how these things are worded because, you know, when people come in for permits, I'm only stuck with what the code says, and I have to make an interpretation off of that.
Is there anything, a confirmation in writing that they're going to keep the rest of the wall up?
I do not have confirmation in writing, but I mean, I've worked with the builder several times and I trust what he says. If they're going to take more down, he'll tell me, but they're not going to. They already put in that French drain system behind. You know, they painted that line on where they wanted to stop the wall demo, and they're going to put the rest of it into the landscaping. So if something changes, he said he'd let me know, but there's no plans at this time. I did talk to the homeowner. She's aware. The rest of that wall will stay.
Okay.
so chapter 28-4 building permits. Was that updated recently, or is this on the same?
No, that hasn't been amended in ages.
1D, construction of retaining walls.
Right, construction, but not demolition.
Yeah, we're talking about demolition permits, not construction.
Chapter 28 requires a building permit for the construction of a retaining wall, but apparently not for demolition of such walls. Which brings us right back to the ambiguity in the definition of a structure. But you know what? I mean, I sent the board and Tim and others some emails on this, and I really don't want to necessarily. I'd have to go back and look at them, but to see whether there's any grounds for saying anything other than I already said in those emails. But as I said, it's really not. That's just giving an opinion to Tim, and if Tim felt there was a violation, it would be something that the village prosecutor would have to handle, which again is not. It's a different position than my position.
Earlier, it said, if I'm not mistaken, that the consideration of destruction is held within the language of construction. Is that not holding?
I'm sorry?
I heard you say, perhaps I'm mistaken, that there
no. Okay, I know, no, that a demolition permit is considered a species of building permit.
That's right.
Whether that means that, destruction equals construction, I'm not sure that that's necessarily logically follows. The chapter that talks about what you need a building permit for talks about various types of, that's a separate question of what do you need a permit for. But
Can I just say something then, in light of this ambiguity? it seems all the more important that we get the nominations complete, the landmarking process completed on the other walls that we have hanging out there. Right? The nominations that we make.
So John, could you weigh in? Will this, in Matt's absence, will the village be placing this on their next agenda for both the chapter 47 and the landscape feature nominations?
Yeah, I mean, I can make sure it's on the.
Yeah,
next one, yeah.
Thank
They,
you.
they already were. They called for the public hearings. There's like, how many were there? There
It's
were,
13, 12 or
9.
13.
Oh, there
yeah.
Yeah, it was 12 or
So
13.
those will all be at the next village board meeting. Will be public hearing on all of those.
Okay.
All right. We move to adjourn.
Okay. do we have a
Second.
Wes seconded, Deb. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Right
sorry
on.
for the length of the meeting. Chalk it up to we haven't seen each other's mugs in a long time.
We always have long meetings.
I was like, we're gonna
Good job,
get this
Kate. Good
done here.
job.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are gonna be
Thank
limited to
you.
an hour because we'll just have more 1 hour design standard. So don't be intimidated by this. Come to the design standard meeting.
No, you-
Night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.